Welcome, agents, to my review of Broken Dawn, an Alex Irvine novel set in the world of Tom Clancy's The Division. Broken Dawn was first published in 2019, the year the second game in the series came out, and it takes place between both games. It follows on from New York Collapse, also by Irvine, which is a kind of survival guide with added notes from one of this book's protagonists. That book was not, in effect, an actual novel, so to write a direct sequel that's a strange creative choice. Irvine's career includes a handful of original works, a few tie-ins to other TV and film series like Supernatural and Pacific Rim, and work on comics for Marvel and games that, unsurprisingly, include The Division. A pretty solid career, but nothing that suggests literary greatness is just around the corner, despite his doctorate and work as a professor. The story is narrated in the third person, but it jumps between a number of characters and uses a restricted, sometimes called over-the-shoulder perspective. So each character relates events, but in a way that shows that only the things that they would be expected to know. It begins with Violet, who's 10 or 11 years old, and lives with a group of survivors at the Smithsonian Castle in DC. So if you've already played the game, you know the fate of most of that group. Violet hangs around with 6 other children at the settlement and generally gets into minor trouble. Our other relators are Aurelio and, far more briefly, Ike, who are both Division agents, and April, who is the one that scribbled all the messages in the Collapse book. The story of the Division, for those who haven't played it, takes place in America after it has been ravaged by a virus outbreak that has left huge parts of it completely lawless. To combat this, a bunch of civilians have been activated as agents for the Division to find out what happened and to put it right. Before we get into the plot of Broken Dawn, though, this is just a quick reminder that you can use the chapters in the description or the slider below to skip this section of the review if you wish, but there are still likely to be spoilers ahead. The book flits between its narrators as Violet and friends wander around DC without a care in the world, even though they're nearly always one step away from somebody shooting at them. April goes into the dark zone to meet the fictional writer of the Collapse book, who sends her halfway across the country on foot so that she can find out whether some people are using her dead husband's research in their attempts to find a cure for a virus that killed so many people. Aurelio sees her enter the dark zone and follows to make sure that she's going to be okay. Later, the Joint Task Force, basically what remains of the emergency services, plan an operation to take back more of New York from the various thugs that occupy parts of it. Ike goes off mission, though, resulting in civilian casualties, and Aurelio finds out and follows him to find out why and maybe get justice for them. The three of them travel individually from New York to Ann Arbor, where they meet up with Ike's intentions unclear, and April finds out that her husband was a respected scientist. Shady operatives prepare to attack the facility and steal the virus cure for their own ends, even though it's not actually there. Meanwhile, armed thugs in DC are about to attack the Smithsonian group, and the JTF and the Division don't have the resources to help, but Violet and her crew have a plan that's almost guaranteed to not help in any way. Now, you might be able to guess from the plot run-through that this is not a good book. Significant parts of the novel are devoted to people giving travel directions to the various three walkers. There are some genuinely strange creative choices made. The Division is a pretty violent game. If you go 2 or 3 minutes without somebody shooting at you, it's likely you're AFK or idling at a settlement. But in Broken Dawn, it is 43 pages of a 350-page novel before there is any kind of shootout, and in truth, probably 100 before anything of significance. Sometimes where there has been action, it is related by one of the characters after the event in a rather matter-of-fact way, and the final-ish shootout at the research lab is really quite poor. It would be hard to claim that the Violet-narrated attack on the Smithsonian is much better. The finale is out of the Deus Ex Machina handbook, with Irvine either deliberately fuddling his timeline or April travelling from Cleveland to DC in a matter of hours when it took her several days on the way out, allowing for the fact that she was in New York when she began the journey. Further, there is no reason for her to even go. She even says herself it's weird that she's going that way when it's Aurelio who is from there, and he has a young family there that he's apparently desperate to see. Seems weird that I'm going to DC when that's where you're from. And he is the Division agent and she is not. And that he rescues her and calls her an important person, even though she's not. Even she doesn't know why he bothers. I'm extracting a valuable human asset. What makes me a valuable human asset? He claims it's because she knows that there is a cure for the virus. Not that she can create a cure, but that she knows there is one. I guess value is much more arbitrary after the apocalypse, because the lady that invented the cure, Aurelio, makes no effort to protect at all. Though Professor Chandrasekhar is really important, April's been our narrator, so she's the one that needs protecting. I'm sure her career as a design manager will be as useful as a professor's career in virology. I was a design manager, Aurelio. I did sketches and spreadsheets. But Aurelio can't go to DC because he has to warn the JTF fuel depots that they're likely to be attacked, even though the attackers already have a fleet of helicopters they can use to attack the lab, but not apparently to take Ike where he needs to be, and the JTF can barely run their trucks, with all three protagonists having to find their own way to Ann Arbor. But if she's carrying an essential message, he really ought to deliver it himself, because he's asking her to travel halfway across the country on her own. Granted, she almost achieved that on her own on the way out, but he's the agent and she's not. They're both basically carrying messages to people, but Aurelio has Isaac, which, though patchy, was working much better nearer New York than near Detroit. So as he travels towards Washington, it seems reasonable to assume that Isaac would allow him at some point to communicate with other agents again. He could potentially do both jobs. It is questionable April can do either one. She's going to turn up at the White House while it's under siege with this ridiculous story about how she travelled from New York to Detroit in the middle of the apocalypse to find out useless information about her dead husband, survived an attack from an extremely well-armoured military group, and has now made the return journey in a matter of hours to tell them that there is a cure for a virus that has destroyed the country and that the cure is in DC. It is conceivable that a mad person could tell that same story, only without actually doing all the walking. Alani Kelso studied her for a long time. "I have to be honest with you," she said. "That's an insane story." Kelso then says that she can get a message to Aurelio and let him know that his kids are safe. So could he not have got a message to her about the virus? Because who are you going to believe? Some woman carrying a dead agent's gear or a living agent? Because there are a handful of people who look at April's shade to issue weapon and backpack and warn her that other agents will be very suspicious of her, potentially even kill her, no questions asked, just for having it. That would be fun, wouldn't it, if Kelso had shot her dead on the White House lawn without even ever getting that message. But if you think that 2 pages of Kelso sat down talking will give readers a nostalgia buzz for all those missions you fought together, you probably haven't played the game.
Can you get these people to safety? I'm gonna go kill the bastards that did this. You're safe now. I promise.
The attack came from Jefferson Plaza. You know what to do.
Hey! Kill them all.
I wonder if that nonsensical flip-flopping came from the word processor of Alex Irvine, and I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest having read his book, because this is a book where someone has the time to write a book about how to survive the apocalypse and get it published, but doesn't have the time to warn anyone that there is an apocalypse coming. This is also a book where the geography of DC seems a bit fuzzy compared to this map, or even this one, because Violet and the children are sent this far away to forage for vegetables, even though it's too dangerous to go to the Air and Space Museum, which is next door. The world of the novel is generally unclear, and actually doesn't even help the narrative of the game. For example, in the game you run missions for the settlement at the Ford Theatre, but after reading the novel, I wonder why I'd bother when they refused to give refuge to 7 small children. I consider the amount of people that I killed for them, the donations that I made to support a settlement of arseholes, and I wonder why I bothered. But I also wonder why they didn't bother themselves. If the kids from the other settlement can wander around this far without any danger, but not this far, when people can apparently move around the dark zone and live in the dark zone without any sort of weaponry. The world of the game shows the survivors huddled into settlements beset on all sides by gang snatching territory and resources, but the world of the novel instead shows that the JTF has effectively barricaded themselves and the populations of DC and New York into a conflict with the gangs. The areas they enclosed in the game were the parts where the government was battling to maintain a semblance of civilization. But in the novel, they are apparently less dangerous than the game shows, but also far more dangerous than anywhere else in America. Other places have thriving trade power and even operating police forces. And if you want to see more things that just don't make any sense, then this is the book for you. When Lieutenant Hendricks marks Ike as rogue, it's just one example. "I'll enter that status in Isaac," Hendricks said, when he sees his watch go red. "Why hasn't Isaac tagged him already?" Aurelio asked. Hendricks was studying the display. "I don't know," she said. "I can't make a formal judgment from here about whether he did anything wrong. As you well know, we don't decide whether division agents are rogue or not. This scene is such a mess that you wonder if it was ever read back after it was written. If he's gone rogue, I hope you find him and nail him to the wall, Agent Diaz. I hope you're wrong about Ronson, but if you're right, go get the SOB." Aurelio is injured in combat, but that combat is related to the reader by Aurelio after the event. He'd shot his way in, cleared the stairwell leading down to the floors occupied by the smugglers, kicked through the fire door just in time to save the JTF team from getting caught in what would have been a lethal crossfire. They were fully engaged with the group at the far end of the hall, and just as Aurelio came out of the stairwell, 4 of the smugglers burst out of a door near him. Since they were looking the other way, towards the embattled JTF team, Aurelio had put them down to dissuade. It's a rare thing for a book based on a video game to be both pretentious and tedious at the same time, but Irvine manages it there with aplomb. I don't understand why he has used just twice here and here, because if he wants this to be exciting, then don't relate it after the events have taken place. Don't use sentences like this or this. Begin this chapter in medias res. Yes, I too can be pretentious. Begin in the heat of the action, because this novel is based on a shooting game and it desperately needs some action. If you want to relate something in a past tense, then take this passage. The first guard pointed west. Quickest way to get there from here is to take the Huron Parkway. You'll find it a mile up on Washtenaw. Go north. When you cross the river, you'll see Fuller Road. Take a left and you'll see the signs, probably 4 or 5 miles from here, and rewrite it to this. The guard gave him directions. He was 4 or 5 miles out, almost there. Do this on the 30 or 40 times you relate the roads that somebody has travelled down, and you'll have room for some action in your action book. Aurelio's motivation in this book, which April assumes is to chase after her, and Irvine is happy for the reader to believe that that is true at that point because it makes her valuable and worth saving when she's neither of those things. But his motivation is actually to find Ike because he abandoned civilians in a firefight and they got killed, and that is wrong. It also makes him a rogue agent. Ronson didn't skip out on the op just to go get a sandwich, Aurelio said. He's answering to someone else now. The most important thing I can do is find out who. The problem with that is that Aurelio also skips out on a firefight twice, leading to civilian casualties. The most egregious example of him doing that is obviously when he does absolutely nothing to protect the staff of the research lab. He doesn't even call for help until the attack is well underway, even when he has a few minutes warning that it's going to happen. The book keeps offering his characters choices as zero-sum decisions, but they're nothing of the sort. As mentioned, Aurelio has to go warn the JTF, and therefore he can't warn the forces in DC, though in truth he only needs to go to one place that has comms to do both. Koopman can only write his survival guide or phone CNN and warn them, when in truth it'd be very, very easy to do both. What sums up the book perfectly is that April has a lengthy and uneventful boat trip down Lake Erie. After she's warned several times that there are dangerous pirates on the water, and they don't actually appear, she says, "Good luck with those pirates," as she leaves, and the captain says, "Consider yourself lucky you missed them." But I don't consider it lucky that she missed them, because it makes the whole part of the novel, all the people mentioning the pirates, nothing more than a waste of my time. How can a doctor of literature not understand that? At least 4 different agents stop April to ask how she got the division's gear. They all mention some mythical other agent who might react with violence to her having the gear, but none of them actually do. So how likely is it? It's just another waste of my time. Her only other gear that identifies her as an agent is a Super 90 shotgun. But how can they identify you as an agent if you can buy them from a shop in England, where our gun laws are far stricter than in America? Carrying a Super 90 will only identify her as somebody carrying a shotgun. Just get another backpack. Perhaps the JTF will have one when they're asking you why you're carrying an agent's one. Irvine also has a horrible habit of writing sentences that aren't sentences. This is BBC Bite Size, so if you're unfamiliar, that means it's for children. But this is a very simple way to be clear what a sentence is. Beyond the obvious stuff, a sentence needs a verb and it must make complete sense on its own. April surveyed the area. Long narrow parking lot to the left, with a park road switchbacking up the bluff behind it. Open grassy area to her right, with more docks and more sunken boats. This first sentence is simple, but it's fine. Subject, predicate, and a complete thought. This one, though, is not. Sunken is a past participle, basically an adjective, so this is not a sentence. Now, if this was a novel written in the first person, and it probably should have been given that you have four separate but not really distinct narrators, I wouldn't care about this. In everyday speech, people leave out stuff all the time, often determiners and subjects, as has happened here, though this has also left the verb out, so that's basically left out everything that makes it a sentence. But Irvine also made the choice to write in the third person. His narrator is separated a step further again and relating the story to the reader. And unless you give your reader a distinct character of his own, like you'll find in Dickens, for example, you should not be writing like this. This sentence is horrible as well, because God knows what this is supposed to be. You have a noun phrase and then a prepositional phrase. But if it's supposed to be one prepositional phrase, this comma suggests it probably is. It's an ugly one at best. Why is he putting a comma before a preposition? This is a sentence and expresses a complete thought, but the verb is in the wrong tense. If it's not just a horrible mistake, then it is a non-finite verb, a verb that does not set the tense of a sentence, and it needs the finite verb to do that. There was a long, narrow parking lot to the left, with the park road switchbacking up the bluff behind it, or start with a prepositional phrase, but make it one. To the right of a long, narrow parking lot, a park road switchbacked up the bluff behind it. Pretty much the only thing positive I could find to say about this book is that the children are not actually that badly written, which is a genuine surprise. But the story offers no pathos to the wider parts of the story, a three-pronged narrative about walking across the country and little else. It is repetitive in the worst way, repeatedly saying that something will happen when it doesn't. The stakes feel negligible, the characters are not particularly interesting, and the sporadic violence is often related in a lifeless and dull way. It sometimes exacerbates that by relating them after the event. One of the most fun things about the game is pairing the shade skills with your gear and weaponry, and none of the agents in Broken Dawn have any shade skills at all. Ultimately, though, the book fails because it's a very dull novel that largely eschews the more or less constant violence of the game, and the descriptive passages are extremely rare, with none of its restricted narrators even attempting to relate the incredible atmosphere of the games, or any atmosphere at all, really. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you wish.